I never thought I'd fall in love standing in the rain, but I guess that's exactly what happened. It was one of those October afternoons where the sky just opens up without warning, the kind of downpour that soaks you to the bone in seconds. I was running late for my shift at the warehouse, sprinting across the parking lot like an idiot because I'd left my jacket in my car when I saw him. This guy standing by the loading dock entrance, holding an umbrella that was way too small for his broad shoulders, and he was just watching me struggle through the rain with this look on his face. Not pity exactly. Something warmer than that. He stepped forward, extending the umbrella toward me, even though it meant he'd get wet too. That's how we met. Both of us crammed under this tiny black umbrella, our shoulders pressed together, rain hammering down around us. I'm Reed, by the way. I work in logistics at the shipping company downtown, mostly pushing papers and yelling at delivery drivers who can't read a schedule. And the guy with the umbrella was Finn. He worked the docks, which explained the shoulders and the arms that I definitely wasn't supposed to be noticing, but absolutely was. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds, both getting drenched anyway because that umbrella wasn't doing much good for either of us, and he said, "Doesn't really fit, does it?" I laughed, actually laughed, water dripping down my face, and said something stupid like, "Better than nothing." He smiled at that, this crooked smile that made something flip in my chest, and we ran together to the entrance. Once we were under the overhang, he shook out the umbrella, and I wiped the rain from my eyes, and we just looked at each other for a moment. I should have just said thanks and walked away. Instead, I stood there like an idiot, very aware that my shirt was plastered to my chest, and his was too, and I was noticing things I shouldn't be noticing about a co-worker I'd just met. "Thanks," I finally managed. He shrugged, said, "Couldn't leave you drowning out there." Then he walked off toward the dock area, and I headed to my office, and that should have been the end of it. Just a nice gesture from a nice guy. Except I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him. The way he'd stepped into the rain without hesitation. The warmth of his shoulder against mine. That smile. I'd known I was gay since college, had even dated a couple guys, but I'd never been the type to develop crushes easily. I was practical, logical, maybe a little too much in my own head. But something about Finn stayed with me. Over the next few weeks I found myself looking for him. Not obviously, I told myself, just happening to walk past the loading docks more often, taking my breaks outside where I could see the dock workers on their lunch hour. Pathetic, really, but I couldn't help it. The thing about working at a shipping company is that office people and dock workers don't really mix. Different worlds, different schedules, different break rooms. But I started finding excuses to cross that invisible line. Needed to verify a shipment, had to check on a delayed container. Totally legitimate work reasons that just happened to take me past where Finn was usually working. He'd see me sometimes and nod or raise a hand in greeting, and I'd feel that same flip in my chest. Ridiculous. I was 28 years old, not some teenager with a crush. Then, one afternoon, about 3 weeks after the umbrella incident, I was in the warehouse checking inventory when I heard someone behind me. Turned around, and there he was, Finn, holding a clipboard and looking slightly awkward. He said, "Hey," and I said, "Hey," back, and we stood there for a second in that weird silence that happens when you want to say something but don't know what. He cleared his throat. "I'm supposed to get your signature on this delivery confirmation. The driver already left, but your office was locked." I took the clipboard, our fingers brushing, and I swear I felt that touch all the way up my arm. Signed it, handed it back. He looked at the signature, then at me, and said, "So you're Reed." I nodded. He smiled that crooked smile again. "I'm Finn." "I know," I said, then immediately felt like an idiot because how did I know his name? We'd never actually introduced ourselves. He didn't seem to mind. Just said, "The umbrella guy." "Yeah," I said. "The umbrella guy." Another pause, and then he asked if I wanted to grab coffee after our shift. "There's a place across the street." Nothing fancy. I said yes before I could overthink it, and he smiled wider this time, said, "Cool, meet you at 6, and walked away. I stood there in the warehouse, holding my inventory sheet, heart pounding, wondering what the hell just happened and whether this was actually happening. 6 o'clock took forever to arrive. I changed my shirt twice in the bathroom, which was insane because it wasn't a date. Just coffee with a coworker. Totally normal. Except it didn't feel normal. It felt like standing on the edge of something, looking down, not sure if I should jump. I met him in the parking lot, and we walked across the street to this little coffee shop that I'd passed 100 times but never been inside. It was warm and crowded and smelled like espresso and cinnamon. We ordered, found a table in the corner, and suddenly I didn't know what to say. Finn saved me. He started talking about work, about how he'd been at the docks for 2 years, how he was actually studying logistics part-time, hoping to move into management eventually. I told him about my job, about how I'd started in the warehouse and worked my way up, how I actually liked the organized chaos of shipping schedules and container manifests. It was easy, talking to him, easier than it should have been. He listened when I talked, really listened, and asked questions that made me think he actually cared about the answers. We stayed until the coffee shop closed, 2 hours just disappearing, and when we walked back to the parking lot, the rain had started again, light this time, just a drizzle. He looked up at the sky and said, "Didn't bring my umbrella." I said, "Guess we'll have to run for it." But neither of us ran. We just walked slowly through the drizzle, and when we reached my car, I didn't want the night to end. He stood there, hands in his pockets, rain speckling his hair, and said, "We should do this again." I said, "Yeah, definitely," trying to sound casual when my heart was doing gymnastics. We started meeting for coffee once a week, then twice, then almost every day after work. Sometimes we'd just sit and talk. Sometimes we'd walk around downtown. Sometimes we'd grab dinner at whatever cheap place was nearby. I learned that he grew up in Oregon, that his dad was a fisherman, that he'd moved here 3 years ago for a fresh start after a bad breakup. He learned that I was from here, that my family didn't really understand me, that I'd spent most of my 20s figuring out who I was and what I wanted. We talked about everything and nothing, and every time we met, I felt myself falling a little bit more. But I didn't say anything, didn't make a move, didn't hint at how I felt, because I wasn't sure if he felt the same way. He'd mentioned the breakup, mentioned an ex, but never specified pronouns. Never gave me a clear sign one way or the other, and I was too scared to risk what we had by assuming. So I just enjoyed being near him, enjoyed the sound of his laugh, the way he'd lean forward when he was really interested in something I was saying, the accidental touches that seemed to happen more and more often. 2 months after that first coffee, we were walking by the river after work, one of those November evenings where the air is crisp and cold and the city lights reflect off the water. We'd been talking about nothing important, just comfortable silence mixed with easy conversation, when Finn stopped walking. I stopped too, turned to look at him. He was staring out at the water, his expression serious, and I felt my stomach drop. Something was wrong. "Reed," he said, still not looking at me. "I need to tell you something." My mouth went dry. "Okay," I managed. He took a breath, turned to face me finally, and the look in his eyes made my heart race. "I really like spending time with you," he said. "Like really like it. More than I should probably admit." I didn't know what to say. He kept going, words coming faster now. "I know we're friends and I don't want to mess that up, but I can't keep pretending that's all this is for me. Every time I see you, every time we talk, I just..." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, looked away. "I'm making this weird." "Sorry, you're not," I said, finding my voice. "You're not making it weird." He looked at me, hope and fear mixed in his expression. I took a breath, decided to jump. I feel the same way. About you. About this. I have for a while now. The relief on his face was immediate. this wave of emotion that made him smile, that real smile, not the careful one he used at work. "Yeah," he said, almost laughing. "Yeah." We stood there grinning at each other like idiots, and then he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him in the cold air, and he said, "Can I kiss you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, and he kissed me. Soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid I might pull away. But I didn't pull away. I leaned into it, into him, one hand coming up to his jacket, anchoring myself to this moment. The kiss deepened, and I felt everything else fade away. The cold, the city noise, the fear I'd been carrying for months. All of it gone, replaced by the feeling of his lips on mine, his hand on my waist, the rightness of finally doing what I'd wanted to do since that first day in the rain. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard, both smiling. He rested his forehead against mine and said, "I've wanted to do that for so long." "Me too," I said. We stood there for a while, just holding each other, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that felt like coming home. After that, everything changed, and nothing changed. We still met for coffee, still walked around after work, still talked about everything and nothing, but now I could reach for his hand when I wanted to. Now I could kiss him goodbye. Now when we sat close together, it wasn't accidental, and the looks we shared had meaning behind them. We kept it quiet at work, not because we were hiding exactly, but because what we had felt private, precious, something just for us. We spent Thanksgiving together, just the two of us in my apartment, attempting to cook a turkey and mostly failing but laughing the whole time. We spent our days off exploring the city, finding little places that became ours, a bookstore with a cat that always sat on Finn's lap, a dumpling place that stayed open late, a park bench overlooking the river where we'd sit and watch the sunset. Normal couple things, I guess, but they felt extraordinary, because I was doing them with him. December arrived, and with it came the cold and the early darkness and the Christmas decorations that the city hung everywhere. Finn mentioned casually that he'd never really done Christmas properly. His family wasn't big on celebrations, and after he'd moved here, he'd usually just worked through the holidays. I decided right then that I was going to give him the best Christmas he'd ever had. Nothing fancy, just real, warm, the kind of Christmas that feels like home. I bought a small tree for my apartment, the first one I'd had in years. Finn came over to help decorate it, and we made hot chocolate and played music and hung ornaments that I'd collected over the years. He picked up this old wooden reindeer that my grandmother had given me when I was a kid, turned it over in his hands carefully, and said, "You kept this?" "Yeah," I said. "It matters to me." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and said, "You matter to me." Just like that. Simple and honest and so sincere that I felt my throat tighten. "Come here," I said, and he did, and I kissed him surrounded by Christmas lights and the smell of pine and cocoa, and I thought, this is it. This is what happiness feels like. Not some grand romantic gesture, not fireworks or drama, just this. Just us, building something real together, one moment at a time. Christmas morning, I woke up to find Finn already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed, holding a small wrapped box. He looked nervous. "I didn't know what to get you," he said. "This might be stupid." I sat up, took the box, opened it carefully. Inside was a small silver compass on a chain. I looked at him, confused but touched. He said, "That day in the rain, when you were running across the parking lot, you looked so lost, like you didn't know which way to go. And then we met and He paused, took a breath. "You helped me find my direction again. After everything that happened before I moved here, I was kind of drifting, but knowing you, being with you, it's like I finally know where I'm headed. So I wanted you to have this, to remember that we found each other. I couldn't speak. I just pulled him close and held him, this man who'd shared his umbrella even though it barely fit, who'd taken a chance on coffee with a guy from the office, who'd been brave enough to say what he felt by the river. "I love you," I said into his shoulder. First time I'd said it out loud. First time I'd let myself feel it completely. He pulled back to look at me, eyes bright. "I love you too," he said. "So much." We spent the day together, just the two of us, cooking breakfast and watching old movies and existing in that perfect bubble where nothing else matters except the person next to you. In the afternoon, we went for a walk, bundled up against the cold, and ended up at the loading dock where we'd first met. It was empty, everyone off for the holiday, just concrete and containers, and the memory of rain. "Remember when you shared your umbrella?" I said. Finn laughed. "That tiny, useless umbrella. Best decision I ever made." We stood there, his arm around my waist, my head on his shoulder, and I thought about how much had changed in just a few months. How one small act of kindness had led to this, to us, to a future that I was actually excited about for the first time in years. The rain started again, because of course it did, light and cold. Finn looked up at the sky, then at me, grinning. "Think we should run for it?" I grinned back. "Nah," I said. "Let's just stay here for a minute." So we did. We stood in the rain, holding each other, and I felt completely, perfectly happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because imperfect was enough. Because standing in the rain with someone you love, getting soaked and cold and not caring at all, that's the kind of moment that matters. That's the kind of moment you remember. Later, back at my apartment, drying off and making hot chocolate, Finn said, "You know what's funny?" "What?" I said. "I almost didn't come to work that day. The umbrella day. The umbrella. I almost called in sick because I was tired and it was raining and I just didn't want to deal with it. But something made me come in anyway." "Fate," I said, half joking. He looked at me seriously. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe just luck. Either way, I'm glad I was there." "Me too," I said. "Me too." As winter turned toward spring, we settled into a rhythm, worked during the week, each other on the weekends. He started spending more nights at my place than his own. We talked about getting a place together, maybe in the summer, somewhere with a little more space and windows that actually opened properly. Normal relationship progression, normal future planning, but it felt anything but normal to me. It felt like building something real, something lasting. We told people at work eventually, not making a big announcement, but not hiding either. Most people were cool about it. A few were weird, but we expected that. What mattered was that we had each other, that we'd built this foundation strong enough to weather whatever came. And things did come. Stress at work, money worries, disagreements about stupid things like whose turn it was to do dishes or what to watch on TV. Normal couple stuff, but we worked through it. We talked, we listened, we compromised. We chose each other, again and again. One night in April, lying in bed, Finn said, "Do you ever think about that day?" "The rain day?" "All the time," I admitted. He smiled in the darkness. "Me too," he said. "I think about how scared I was to talk to you, how I almost chickened out asking you for coffee, how I practiced what I was going to say by the river for like an hour before you got there." "You did not," I said, laughing. He laughed too. "I did," he insisted. "I was terrified. Thought you might just laugh at me or say you weren't interested or..." He trailed off. I rolled over to face him, found his hand in the dark. "I was interested from day one," I said. "I just didn't think you were." He squeezed my hand. "Guess we were both idiots." "Yeah," I said. "Lucky idiots." Looking back now, I can trace everything to that moment. Standing in the rain, sharing an umbrella that barely fit. Two strangers becoming something more. It wasn't love at first sight. Not really. It was something better. It was the beginning of knowing someone, of letting yourself be known. It was choosing kindness when you didn't have to. It was taking a chance on coffee, on conversation, on the possibility that maybe this person could be important. And he is important. Finn is the person I text when something funny happens at work. The person I cook dinner with and argue with and make up with. The person whose laugh I'd recognize anywhere, whose hand fits perfectly in mine, whose presence makes everything feel more manageable. He's my best friend and my partner, and the guy who shared his umbrella even though it barely fit. And I fall in love with him more every single day. People ask sometimes how we met, and I always smile when I tell them. In the rain, I say. He saved me from drowning. It's not quite accurate, but it's not quite wrong either. Because that's what love does, isn't it? It saves you. Not in some dramatic rescue way, but in the quiet, everyday way of having someone choose you, of choosing someone back, of building a life together one moment at a time. So, yeah, I never thought I'd fall in love standing in the rain, but I did, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I'd stand in 1,000 rainstorms, get soaked 1,000 times, just for the chance to meet him again, to start over, to have this life we've built together, because some moments change everything, some kindnesses lead to forever, and some umbrellas, even the ones that barely fit, are exactly what you need.